Our negotiations have made progress, but gaps remain. And there are people in both our countries and beyond who oppose a diplomatic resolution. I want to take this opportunity once again to speak directly to the people and leaders of Iran. I believe that our countries should be able to resolve this issue peacefully with diplomacy.
Well, in what some are calling a surprise move, President Obama making his pitch directly to the Iranian people this week on the need for getting a nuclear agreement with Tehran. Critics say, though, the president is waging a full campaign to sign a deal without congressional input. And now comes news that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee is planning to vote soon on a bipartisan move to force the commander-in-chief to get Senate approval before any deal goes through. I caught up with Wyoming Senator John Barrasso, who's on that committee, and offers up his view on why many in the Senate aren't backing down.
We want to make sure that any deal is accountable, enforceable, and verifiable, because we think that a world where Iran has nuclear weapons is less safe, less stable, less secure, and it's sanctions that brought Iran to the table in the first place, and we want to make sure that the president doesn't unilaterally lift sanctions that have come from Congress. Mr. President, you need to come to the Senate specifically to deal with the sanctions that the Senate has put on Iran. You cannot unilaterally lift them. We need to see the deal.
What do you make of the reports that we're hearing that the White House is seriously looking at bypassing Congress altogether and going through the UN?
I have all sorts of problems with that, because we know that the President of the United States really has a very bad track record when it comes to foreign relations. We've seen it with the reset button with Russia. We've seen it with the red line in Syria, and then they used chemical weapons. We saw it when the President withdrew all of our troops from Iraq, even though the general said, no, please don't do that, Mr. President. That let a void, that let ISIS come in, and then the President really underestimated their powers, called them a JV team. So even in Yemen, where the president called it a success, we know that Iran has had significant involvement in the overthrow of the government there. So across the country, across the world, and across the country, our friends, they don't fear us. Our friends don't trust us. Our enemies don't fear us worldwide. And now we're seeing in the Middle East where other countries want to get a nuclear weapon because they're afraid of Iran with a nuclear weapon.
Well, that was my next question. Are you really concerned that this is all going to lead to an arms race in the Middle East as a result of any type of deal with Iran?
Well, I was in the Middle East earlier this year visiting some of our Wyoming Air National Guard members, but then also went to Saudi Arabia to visit with the leadership there. They are worried that if a deal goes through that they believe will allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Saudis want a nuclear weapon. They can either get it from South Korea. They formed an agreement there. They have friends in Pakistan, but also Egypt, Turkey, the Emirates, all of them want nuclear weapons. So you're going to actually have a nuclear arms race in the Middle East if a deal goes through where the United States allows for Iran to ultimately develop a nuclear weapon. Remember, this whole thing, the negotiations were about dismantling Iran's opportunities to even develop a nuclear weapon. But instead, the president's changed direction and got it to a point where it is about delaying a nuclear weapon. It was supposed to be stopping a weapon, not just managing a nuclear-armed Iran.
I want to ask you one question about the impact about the Israeli election right now, the overall fallout that's happening still, the tensions between the White House and the Netanyahu government. How do you see this thing playing out over the next few weeks?
Well, I have a great deal of respect for the people of Israel to be able to elect their own leadership. I've met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and a number of times he spoke with great force to the joint session of Congress. But I think the relationship between this president and the Prime Minister of Israel is the rockiest of a relationship that there's been maybe in 35 or 40 years between the Prime Minister and the President of the United States. We want to continue to work closely with the Israeli people and with the leadership of Israel, and I see that as a bipartisan commitment, Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill.